Okay, thank you for attending today's webinar. And then I'm going to start with my presentation first. Okay.
Yeah, Alex, some people are saying the connection's not very good. So maybe if we switch off our webcams, it will help the bandwidth. I don't know. I'll do mine anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can leave a message to the chat, so we can yeah let them know about it. Okay, so first. Okay, so thank you for everyone to attend today's webinar. Today's webinar is reviews of the ESG, and Peter don't like to put in like ESG and sustainability at the same time. So ESG and sustainability, the insight from the global leaders. So this is the motivate that I organize the topic, the subject topic, or under the ESG and sustainability. And then I invite a lot of great readers in this fair. So you can see that I only count to the directly related to ESG and sustainability. I also did another in combination of the digital transformation or the other technology. And then we have these speakers, and then we already have their speaking recorded. So I will share the information, and I will share this slide so you can see this recording later. So fortunately, that among these previous speakers, we have 9 speakers to they accept my invitation to participate as a live session today. So unfortunately, Juliana has some family emergency problems. So we have a total of 8 will be joined as they will share, for example, they already did provided their insight about the previous topic, but today's topic is not just for their focused area, but also I want to hear from them for the other area because they can share their insight in a different view. So each speaker will spend 10 minutes, and then they will talk about the review or additional comment, recent trend, and the new insight, the future directions of their previous talk or other topics. So it will be a great opportunity to learn from these global readers about what the current status and the vision of the ESG sustainability. So schedule that I spent 20 minutes. I will be very quickly go over that just the introduction of the speakers, and then what was topic they did before. And then you see that each speaker will spend 10 minutes. So we have Juliana is missing, but the Kit, he was a speaker in balancing sustainability and the profitability. So he will make up this section. So Kit, you will be in the Juliana session. And then Manuel, and then Mark, and then B, Keith, Belly, Peter, Paul, in this order. But it does not matter, in case that you some emergency situation, you can be the first one rather than the later one. So just have in mind that. Okay, so I just shared this information before. So, and also I'm going to post it in my slide share, so you can download it. So you can see the details. So I cannot go over whole topic of this one, but the first one is ESG and sustainability and the measurement. So the first topic was to important a cornerstone of the what we are doing, right? What is the ESG and what is the SDG and what is sustainability are doing? So what the purpose of doing? So we set the stage like a terminology. For example, Peter, just let me know that the ESG is sustainability different. Then what's the difference? And then what's the difference? The purpose of the SDG and ESG, and then most importantly, that what really can measure this like a performance, because in investing side, for example, ESG is mostly adopted investors, and sustainability is the old history, and SDG is a global level, like for example, is a public sector like a proposed. So we are looking at this kind of different topics. So, and then fortunately we have a Joe was a speaker. He's really great. He's a lot of experience in this matter. So he will share for additional insight, or he will leave you. So I will kick you over for this one. And then I will let share you through the email, or you can see later in the, you can download it. So this is a whole like a one-on-one type, like all the information, informative, like what is like a sustainability ESG standard reporting, what's going on, and then what's the measurement metrics, and then what's the issue with the current challenges, current like a sustainability measurement, or something like that. So I elaborate is I spend a lot of time to understand what's the best way to summarize this one. I really have expertise in summarizing something. So, but my background is have a physics degree and then I studied the universe. So I'm very good at make it easy and summarize the complex phenomena, and then I use my capability talent to do this area. And then whenever I see something complex, I make it in a very like succinct and summarized. So we need to talk about we need to think about this kind of the matter. Okay, so next topic was balancing sustainability profitability, and fortunately we have a manual and the key today. So the kit will talk first and the manual in the second. So this is very important topic. The motivation is that here is the one summarize everything here, but the recently the ESG and sustainability is mainstream. So nobody denied that we need to like implement ESG and sustainability like be into the business practice. And then there are a lot of the like investors, for example, Ready Frank, like of the like stakeholder capitalism. And then someone said like, for example, we are the like a bottom line. We need to be a bottom line, so we need to care about like, for example, people, planet, and profit. But the reality is that the people tended to be like to focus on short-term like profitability, right? Because of the business should be run through this profitable business, right? So when there is conflict between the like profitability, sustainability, there was always trade-off, and the more way on short-term profitability. And so the conundrum that I mentioned was that in the surface, the investors and companies express that the sustainability is very important, and it's a top priority, and then the board level concern. But when they actually happen with there is something happen conflict between profitability and sustainability, and they weigh one more profitability. So we are looking at like, is there any kind of the solution for this? So we talk about a lot of like a balance scorecard or the other like method. I also like developed like using the GISA technology, GISA transfer into with like ESG. And so this is the one important topic, and so we have two previous speakers, so they share their insight about this. Okay, so this is the kid is the famous book author. So fortunately, he joined today, so we'll hear from him. And then balance scorecard is all the technology, all like a business methodology, but it's revived in the recent Harvard Business Review. And then at the time we had like expert in this field, but unfortunately we cannot like too much talk about this one. And then Manuel today he joined, so he will look at how actually the balancing the sustainability and the profitability in some methodological way. And then he also published his recent white paper about this one. So he may give information, then you can download the white paper. And then also I gave you my white paper, so you can download it. And then this is very important topic, actually, the climate change, right? Because climate risk change is one of the the urgency. So we recently there are a lot of reporting that we are like almost like after the 2 million years, as we are the highest level of the CO2 level. You may heard about the news, and then so and we hear about a lot of climate change and some severe weather situation, and so this is very important, and how we risk manage this kind of the climate change related risk. And fortunately we have a expert, Mark. So Mark will be share his insight about this important topic, how we can dealing with this climate change risk. Okay, and then I gave you some for example, TCFD, climate change risk management, a methodology, and how you SBTI, science-based, how you can transition to net zero, so you can look at it. And then recently there were a lot of digital technologies can have it, so you can look at it. And then this is another topic that I weigh on is the mostly the ESG and sustainability is a matter with the big company. You can Fortune 500 have reporting, for example, recently there was the SEC regulators passed a rule that that some company in the stock market, or some have some condition, they should mandatory reporting about how they manage their climate risk changing. So mostly this kind of sustainable ESG matter is concerned with a big company, but the situation will be changing as because sustainable ESG will be the a joint effort, not just for the big company, but the whole company, industry, and nation. So it is changing the environment that even the startups are thinking about the sustainability and ESG business inside. And then also the traditional venture capital, PEs, and then definitely the impact investing is one area actually the investing in the consider the investment portfolio in when they invest in the for example the innovator in startups that developing the solutions or the new innovation in the get over some problem with the climate change or the other sustainability issues. But the traditional venture capital VCs also started looking at this area, and then I found that several venture capitalists, especially they formed their investment fund for only for the purpose of the investing in startups related sustainability ESG. So we has today we have a B is expert in this sphere. So she will share insight about how was the matter with the startup ESG and sustainability. Okay, so I gave you some information about the current trend about that, so you can look at it later. Okay, so this is the one also all the topic, but also very important is how you actually establish, how you create the business cases. Very important because one of the reasons that the people are hesitate to when you have a conflict with the profitability and sustainability is that it's not sure that whether sustainability value will be give you the mid return as a financial return. And then so the way actually to expect and the measure that your ESG sustainability management effort and to be to make a decision making that fully implement into your everyday practice of a business, you need to prove of something. It will be successful and it will be give you the financial value. So this is a case that you need to consider the business cases. And fortunately, the Manier has maybe have some time limitations, so he may be have no chance to talk about this one. But he may be combined with in his talk about in the previous balancing sustainability and then a profitability. And fortunately, Keith is the literally world well-known expert in this sphere, so he will share about the topic of this one. Then I give you some introduction of this one. And then this one is a most recent event I had with 5 distinguished speakers. And fortunately, we have today 3 speakers about like a circular economy and then sustainable product, and then not just the sustainable product, because I know that Paul and Peter and Belly are expert in all aspects of the sustainability. So they will share insight about not just for the sustainability and circular economy, they can share other aspects of the sustainability ESG matter. And the sustainable finance, this is a very, very important topic, but unfortunately, because we only had 2 speakers before, and then I contacted them, they could not join today. But so I'm just to give you the one snapshot that we think about is that, because it's one of the like there are a lot of the, for example, here is one that there is a growing, like a sustainable investment means investment in the like ESG factors considered decision making their investment. There are a lot of fun because we need a lot of the money to support this effort. And then there are a lot of the green bond and then traditional fund, and a lot of the like technology can use this this kind of the funding estimation or the. And then one focus actually also there is a regulation of the like a greenwashing, even the greenwashing not just for the like a companies, greenwashing for this kind of the ESG like investors. So there was a regulation. And then there is a like for example like seeking for like a ESG like ARPA, so they are more better return in the above the market like average. And this is good news that there is several ways actually that you can have a financial ARPA. But the topic, the most of the like hot and then the key was in this subject matter was whether there is a what they talk about the trade-off or balancing. So I suggest balancing means that because usually always think about the like for traditional like in the finance is about the maximize return, but you need to think about the most of the think about the trade-off between the like financial return and the sustainable value. But we had like a lot of discussion about that. Actually, the not just trade-off is can be balanced. So we have a more clever and a smart way to invest. And then how actually the issue was the first topic, how actually can measure what we are really measure is like input or the outcome or the impact. And then there was like a discussion about that there is a still the lack, the exactly measure what you have is actually what the purpose of this investment. We want to invest to the company today to have an impact, positive impact to the society, people and ours. But actually what the measure is not actually to measure that kind of impact. So there was an issue that in the financial sectors. And then the sustainable infrastructure is a rare topic that not many people, even the sustainable ESG professionals that consider. But we had a lot of discussion about infrastructure is very important in the sustainable infrastructure. What is mean by sustainable infrastructure? What is essential infrastructure? Like for example, like to how they actually have a problem with like a climate change or some how they can actually afford the sustainable financing or something like that. So this is on topic you maybe know about the Biden administration actually got the $1.2 trillion for the rebuild this kind of the infrastructure. So this is one topic that we can consider. I gave you the good example. So this is everything that I want to show you today as a whole topic. And then I will start my sharing. Okay, so we are going to start with the first, let me check, I didn't check whether she joined today. I'm not sure that Joe, are you there? Let me check his email because a lot of people send me. Oh, a lot of people still at previous. Okay, so okay, so I need to ask him to. I will contact him again. So okay, so Kit,
Hi there. Yes.
yeah, can you start first? So I will contact Joe.
Sure.
Yeah, you can share if you have a presentation. You can share it.
Right. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Kit, and I was one of the presenters talking about the importance of addressing people, planet, and profitability simultaneously. Is what in my various travels, I have actually found that a lot of organizations think that optimizing this tree is not possible. And in fact, even yesterday when I was doing a presentation, there were quite a lot of hesitation to actually even think about addressing this tree together. Don't worry, I will not be running through the whole presentation with you today. I am literally going to highlight some of the key information. Now, firstly, just a little bit of a background on what I do, because that kind of gives you some context of where I am coming from. So a lot of my work is actually centered around helping many organizations across the globe and also many governments trying to put in place a good governance and a system to manage and improve leadership and management quality in terms of improving the quality of the company's products and services, its environmental impacts, its energy and raw material consumption, and also in terms of health and safety. And one of the key things that I've observed over the last 25 years or so is that many companies have a very, very specific way to look at optimizing raw materials or energy or quality or health and safety or energy. And they will be looking at something in the market that is new, something in the market that is the next big thing, or something that is more that they're not doing, or perhaps something that is different. And to a large extent, that is the default view of how company apply optimizing the needs for the people, the needs for the planet, against the needs of the bottom line, profitability. However, a lot of data actually exists to show that this tree, people, planet, and profit, is not different things. And addressing people and addressing planetary needs is not going to be at the detriment of the profitability. And I could actually cite you a lot of papers that are published in the academic journals on why that is not the case. But what I thought would be very useful is to actually summarize what are the three things that is actually needed as I have observed across my career. And to a large extent, it can be summarized into three big things. Yeah, a need for strategic alignment, a need for active management, and the technical elements of the quality or the environment or the occupational health and safety, and also resource productivity aspects. Now, often what you will find is that if we only have one element in an organization, it will not work. In fact, if we have strategic alignment, but it's not based on analysis, or if it is not based on active management, that item will remain a wish list. Yeah, vice versa for active management and technical analyses. And often, if we only have just two elements, not the third, again, the whole initiatives and the optimization will slow down. And what is actually needed is that magical sweet spot in the center. And it is about pushing every single organization towards that sweet spot. Now, in my personal work and also through a lot of my discussions with Robert Kaplan, with several academics in Stanford and also in Cambridge Business School, what I have eventually identified is 10 very, very different areas forming these three circles that are frequently one or more of the drivers that prevents an organization to optimize the resources they consume, the quality, the environmental impact, and also health and safety at the same time as profitability. And these are the 10 issues that we usually find. And most of the time, several of these items will be missing, or in some instances, we have companies who have gold-plated technical analyses, which actually creates the weak link, being the management and also being the leadership component. So all three elements are important, and hopefully if you could take anything away from me, take this snapshot. These are the 10 things that each company must do well to optimize people requirements, planetary requirements, and also optimizing profits at the same time. Now, what I didn't present in the past was actual real data. In fact, this was actually done and published based on the UK's manufacturing industry. And what this academic have actually done is to actually plot the energy intensity of the worst managed 25% of the UK manufacturing company versus the best managed 25% of the manufacturing industry in the UK. And you can actually see the statistical shift in energy intensity lower. Yeah, and that reduction actually accounts for 17.4% energy reduction, 3.7% productivity increase, and the academy also reported improvements in raw materials, waste, capital deployed, improvements in skilled labor, but they did not put a figure towards that. Now, the similar studies are available throughout the globe. And an interesting study that was published in 2022, very early this year, actually compared the best top 10% of the manufacturing companies in the US versus the bottom 10 in terms of the quality of leadership, the quality of management, and how much it is based on data analyses and engineering driven. In fact, the difference actually accounts for 18% productivity increase, 11% employee skills development, 21% less injuries, and they were actually also reporting on average about 36% less incidents that needs a major pause in what the companies are doing. So the interesting thing here is that the data actually tell us that good quality leadership, the alignment of leadership, the good active management. Yeah, that means managing the whole company so that all of these improvement initiatives that is based around improving employee welfare, improving the social expectations, improving the environment and the resource consumption can happen at the same time. And they are in fact one and the same thing. They are part of the same equations. Now, as Alex mentioned, I wrote all of this in a book, and what I've actually included in the book is a description of each of these 10, what I call strategy to execution premium, an explanation of why it works from the evidence perspective, and also how companies could implement every single of these 10 elements. Now, what is also in the book is a long list of examples of companies that I've written about. And this range from very small companies who manufacture slippers, and also companies that provide small scale accommodation and hospitality, all the way to some of the brands that you will recognize instantly. So all of these companies are doing various parts very, very well, and it is where I actually highlighted them in the book. So it is also another opportunity to impress on everyone that optimizing people, profits, and the environment can be done, and these companies are attesting to the fact that it can be done in reality, and they are benefit from it. So with that, everyone, thank you for your attention. I will hand you back to Alex. Alex, back to you. Alex, you're muted.
Thank you, Kit. And yeah, if you have any question to Kit or any question about his book, and then you leave your question in the chat. And Manuel, finally, I was waiting for this. I listened in several ways to reach you. And finally, you're here. So you're next time.
I much appreciated. Yesterday was my birthday. I received many happy birthday. I answered to them on LinkedIn. So the Microsoft and LinkedIn detected there is too much activity, so they kicked me out for 3 days. So that was their birthday present to me.
I see.
What can I say?
Anyway, fortunately, just in time. So
Thank you.
I'm introduced as, for example, the Kit will represent the KISS will representing the the sustainability business case. So I want you to focus on balancing sustainability and profitability. So actually, I introduced as recently wrote a white paper, so they may be interested in the looking at your white paper. So you can leave your white paper download in later. In the chat, and then just start to what you're in your insight or the comment or the view about your previous talk and
sure. And if you can let me share, I also can share. I read your mind, so I have the white paper ready to be shared. So I can share it on the screen as well as we go through it really quickly.
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yes.
Let's do that. And thank you, everybody. First thing, Alex, thank you, because you're coaching us together with Vincula Group, together with Connects, together with the people at Future Processing, and many other people which advise us on the paper, me and Ertan along the road. And we hope that this will be actually part of a collection of papers. Alex, you wrote the first one. I don't know if you talked about it today.
Yeah, I did. So I shared the link, so you can share yours, and then you.
I'll share the link after this talk. And this is sort of the second part, and it addresses the questions and proposes a view of how we can create a dashboard for the board of directors and for the executives of the companies to define the main KPIs and track the KPIs over time, because the role of the board of directors, of course, is to make sure that sustainability is work in progress. And in order for that, they need a tool to track the sustainability across the company. So without too much, I want to make sure we received actually Vincula. We received also Future Processing, which is a leading company on digital transformation working in Europe. And last but not least, Connects, which is a group that connects many, about 54 actually, different European and Latin American sites that are related to sustainability, ESG, digital transformation, and it's a site actually for small and medium business transactions as well. So going to the white paper, and apologies I didn't make a PowerPoint out of it. I think the most important parts are an illustration that Erdan has proposed on how the evolution through the history of the paradigms, the mind changes of the companies and board of directors, starting back in history with what we call it accounting profit maximization. So we really look at the paper, if you want, the tracking by the accounting of the company of how the profits were generated, and is about 50 years ago is the doctrine of shareholder value came about. We moved to paradigm, the second paradigm, where we incorporated the cost of equity. So this is the time the stock market, the equity, started to become part of the shareholder value, of course. Much more recently, and still being debated, I was listening to Kit a little bit, and is the stakeholder values, is the move from the paradigm of shareholder to a broader paradigm where we're looking at employees, we're looking at the people in the community, we're looking at, of course, the customers, we're looking at the supply chain and how the supply chain people are involved. So this is still work in progress. And again, Alex, thank you for putting together this review, because I think many of the speakers will talk about that today, the stakeholder value. Moving on, this is a simple but somewhat intriguing diagram. If you want a simple activity matrix, if you want to see, if you are on the board of directors, just came as a new member, you would like to know that your company is in the green area. It creates shareholder value and stakeholder value. I know that many debates in the industries are actually focused on creating or separating shareholder value from stakeholder value. And what I'm saying, many companies think that still stakeholder value, it's a cost center. It is a cost to the company. And really the art and really the science of digital transformation is to create, to align stakeholder value and shareholder value. I'm sure we'll talk about sustainability as a triple bottom line today, again, many times. And this is really in the green area. So ideally, the board of directors' job is to increase shareholder value and stakeholder value together. And of course, the worst case scenario is in red, and it's when both are actually degraded or downgraded. So moving on to so this is the activity matrix in the white paper. And last, we'll go through the what we call the 5 forces of the sustainable strategy. And we talk now, and I really recommend to the people today that are in attendance to think that we move from vision and mission to a company's purpose. So the purpose encompasses, integrates also the stakeholder value with the shareholder value. The vision and mission, if you read about a few years ago, the vision and mission statements were bring value to the shareholder and satisfy the needs of our customers. And variants of this vision, it was throughout the industry. But now the firm has a purpose to help the environment, to help the people, to help the customers, to help their employees, and create value to the shareholders, of course. So what we created at the Actionable Knowledge Foundation Institute was a model that integrates 3 factors: sustainability, ESG, and digital transformation. And it is more in the white paper, but in the interest of time, I will go through all of the elements. Moving on the white paper, we use this framework, which we remember, we call it economic, digitalization, governance, environmental, social. I'm sure you'll recognize this integration of 2 major transformation processes. Alex has spoken many, many times about that, and there are many webinars on this topic. But taking this to the next level, we created a dashboard that I'm going to go very soon to, which can allow, in a simple and graphical way and very easy to track the progress of the company. Here is an example of the dashboard for the board of directors, which takes these 5 forces of the sustainable strategy and combines them in one simple graphical way to present the progress of the KPIs of sustainability. And the white paper has 2 examples. One is on Coca-Cola Company. We did an analysis on their, Erdan has done an analysis on the CSR reporting, and I done one on the Ford Company. If I can go to it. I'm sorry, let me track back. Well, apparently it's not in this version of the. So this is the white paper. As a final reminder, the white paper is about the actionable sustainability that will be integrated in a number of white papers, starting with Alex and continuing with this one under the coordination of Vincula. So if any questions, please put them in the and I'll present the link, and please put it in the comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel. So I know that you have another meeting. So before you leave, please put every information in the chat so other people follow you.
I will right away. Thank you very
LinkedIn
much.
connection, LinkedIn profile, and then your white paper, everything. Maybe if in case the other speaker, in case that you leave earlier, then just put in your information in the chat.
Right,
Okay,
and I'll put also my email address in case.
And then all the speakers, if you want to share your presentation, and then just send me, and then when I share this recording, I will provide all the presentation if you want. It's optional, so it's up to you. So if you want to share, then you can do it. Okay, so next is Mark. So Mark is expert in climate change and especially risk management. So you can start now.
Okay, let me get the right screen up here for screen sharing. Okay. People can see my screen, climate risk?
Yes.
Okay.
Risk is yeah, red.
So I'm a climate risk person, and I have been for a long time, and I think you'll see that in the course of my presentation, which is a little bit different from, I think, most of the other presentations, since focused more on ESG kinds of issues. By way of background, I started in climate change 35 years ago. I'm now focused on thinking about climate change from a knowledge management perspective and trying to figure out whether organizing sort of the infinity of climate risk and climate change information, organizing that into a knowledge management system can help with getting better decisions. And this is available online. And it's the closest thing today to a collective intelligence on climate change. And that's where I'm coming at this topic from, because I do focus an enormous amount of time sort of on the climate risk literature. And I think it's really important in terms of taking, you know, Kit's presentation into account and other presentations that we'll see. We've been talking about sustainability now for decades, and we've been talking about climate change for decades. And yet, in terms of fossil fuel emissions on the left, in terms of global temperature on the right, you would almost think that we hadn't been doing anything at all. And so there's a fundamental disconnect here between sort of the idea that we're tackling climate change through sustainability and through stakeholder capitalism. Maybe we are, and maybe things would be worse if we weren't doing those things, but it is also true that what we're doing doesn't seem to be having any obvious impact on the fundamental problem. And the other big issue here from a risk perspective is that almost all of the conversation about climate risk focuses in on expected risk, on sort of the most likely risk that that the IPCC tells us is most likely. And that's not, you know, that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a bad idea. And if we were rolling the dice on climate risk 1,000 different times, if we were doing we are doing a planetary experiment, and if we were able to replicate that experiment 1,000 times, then focusing on the expected risk outcome would make some sense. The problem is that we're only running this planetary experiment once. And so focusing on the expected risk is potentially a very bad idea from a risk perspective, because most of the actual business risk is in the long tail of the distribution. And it includes lots of things that are sometimes called gray rhinos, where totally likely pretty predictable over time. But there's also the black swan events farther out that are potentially truly catastrophic. And it's worth thinking here, and this is from a Mark Linus's book about 6 degrees. It's worth thinking about, you know, what are we likely to see from climate change? Because the best estimate at this point, I would suggest, is that, you know, we're going to get to at least 3.5 degrees. The current conversations about 1.5 and 2 degrees, they sound great, but we're not going to get there. There is no reason to believe we're going to get there. Let me put it that way. We could, but there's no reason to believe that we will based on past history and current trends. And so then we have to think about, well, what does 3 degrees of average global temperature change actually mean? And you know, the idea that we are able to assess all of these things and put them into our risk picture and disclose the risk, and then investors make rational decisions around this risk, no, it's not going to happen, and it can't happen, because climate change just isn't that kind of risk. And so to say, well, climate change might have a 0.5% on my return on investment. No, that you can't think about climate risk that way, because you're totally missing most of the risk. And what's really happening here in a very real perspective is this John Maynard Keynes quote, that we just, as human beings, we assume that the future will look like the past. And it is very difficult to get our minds to do otherwise. And another problem that we have is that there are so many cognitive biases in our heads. And this is probably the best quote on climate change that exists today. In all the forces of willful blindness come together like synchronized swimmers in a spectacular water ballet. That is just a great quote on climate change, even though Margaret Heffernan's book on willful blindness had nothing really to do with climate change. She still comes up with the best quote. Now, I actually wrote the first business textbook on climate risk back in 2011 for the London School of Economics for a course they were teaching. And my point then, and it remains true today, the point that I argued in that book was that conventional methods of business risk management were not going to work for climate change. And that ultimately, the only thing that would manage business risk would be tackling climate change. And the only thing that will tackle climate change is public policy. You have to internalize the externality somehow. There is no way that voluntary measures that 10% of companies undertake will ever have a significant impact on climate change. And so when you see most of the discussions today of companies, reducing their emissions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of those things that they're doing to quote unquote tackle climate risk will not reduce their climate risk. I mean, sure, perhaps at a very small margin or under some policy assumptions about carbon pricing, et cetera. If you've reduced your energy intensity, maybe you're reducing your risk. But the reality here is that turning climate risk into an accounting game, so to speak, doesn't get at the true underlying problem of climate risk. And global carbon accounting is critical to understanding societal risk. Corporate carbon accounting is not really critical to understanding most business risk, because the business risk is systemic and companies are inherently almost unable to deal with systemic risk variables. What's sort of happening here from a risk management perspective is that we're managing the risks that we can see and that we normally deal with under the streetlight, even though most of the risks aren't there at all. But because it's the only streetlight around, we sort of focus on that streetlight. And so this, is when we do carbon footprints and carbon offsets and ESG and risk disclosure, we're under that streetlight. And yet that's not where most of the climate risk will come from. And so we're missing most of the risk. When we think about net zero commitments and most of the ways that companies are talking about tackling climate change today, what we're really engaged in is a fallacy of division, where you take the global carbon budget, you split it up by all the companies in the world, sort of the science-based targets initiative idea, and then each company can say, we're doing our part. Okay, fine. But if only 10% of the companies in the world do their part, it won't actually make any difference for climate change. And so again, it comes back to the question of what actually would contribute to climate change mitigation from as business risk management. And you may or may not find the cartoon amusing. This is a cartoon of mine from quite a few years ago, and it sort of gets at this idea that there's all sorts of great things happening from a sustainability perspective, whether individual, whether corporate, whether footprint reductions, whether ESG, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, all of that stuff is along this path that is headed up the cliff. And at the end of the day, we're still dealing with 3.5 degrees of average global temperature change. And that's potentially catastrophic. So there is a fundamental disconnect between most of our conversations about sustainability and our conversations about the impacts of climate change. They're like ships passing in the night that are not, that simply don't reflect each other's realities. And to sort of end things here, I think, from my perspective, it's absolutely critical whenever we talk about any of these types of measures, footprint reductions, buying carbon offsets, ESG commitments, net zero commitments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have to test our climate assumptions in a much more sophisticated way than we generally do. And I love this cartoon on the right there, lots of calculations on the left, lots of calculations on the right. And then a miracle occurs is somewhere in the middle, and pointing out, I think you should be more explicit in step 2. Most of the conversations that we're having in the ESG space are sort of assuming that miracle. And I can't figure out where that miracle is going to come from. And when you look at it from a climate risk perspective, that's a bad place for us to be. And so I've probably said enough in terms of pissing you off or potentially pissing you off. So let me stop there.
Thank you, Mark. I have one question, because I look at your like a figure in the you wrote 20 years ago about the climate change the subject in the textbook. And then I look at your figure like a butterfly. Have you intended like a butterfly effect for the climate change?
No, I had nothing to do with picking the butterfly for the cover of the book. And butterfly and chaos theory is relevant to weather, perhaps, not really relevant to climate change.
I see. Thank you. Okay, so next is B. B, are you there? Yeah, it's your turn.
Yep, I'm here. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mark, for the great presentation. Really agreed with a lot of your points, particularly around public policy being the key institutional driver we need. So I'm not sure if any of you were at the previous talk that Alex hosted that focused on startups and ESG in the sustainability space. My focus in this conversation today will be shifting gears a little bit to understand how these macro trends that we've been discussing affect the startup space and what smaller, medium enterprises and younger companies can and should be doing given those macro factors. Feel free to chime in at any point with questions in the chat, and I'll try to get to them. If we don't get to them, then feel free to connect with me after. A little bit about me, just to give you some context. I run a social impact consultancy called The Power of We, and I work with a breadth of different entities, from large Fortune 100 companies advising board members and C-suite executives to really scrappy young startups that are contending with all of the normal factors, demands, and pressures that a fledgling young company is dealing with, and really try to guide and introduce climate action and climate justice at that sort of ground zero level in order to avoid having to do it later. Because as we know that as a lot of large companies are struggling with, that causes more challenges, problems, and resources that can be avoided. And I would really challenge us all to flip the script a little bit and think about ESG and sustainability as value creation and opportunity, rather than, I think, what it's often considered as risk mitigation, risk management, and avoiding potential reputational, financial harm. So flipping that sort of mindset, I think, is really crucial in the overall business conversations and approach to leveraging ESG for organizational growth, market opportunities, differentiation, competitive advantage, etc. So today I want to share a little bit about what the macro trends mean for startups in particular. We know that there is more attention around ESG and sustainability and the alphabet soup of disclosures. What does that all mean, and what are the implications for larger public companies that are receiving more mandates and regulation to tighten and enforce what is required of them by way of reporting. So for example, in the EU, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, is new legislation requiring all large companies to publish regular reports on environmental and social activities. The intent is to help investors, consumers, policymakers, and other stakeholders. We've been talking about this concept of stakeholder capitalism rather than just shareholder capitalism, right? To evaluate these companies' non-financial performance. And as Mark and others have talked about, we really have to consider holistically the impacts that companies have on the environment and on society, rather than just the financial impact, which we've been doing as a status quo sort of capitalist operation that has gotten us to this point, to this unsustainable point thus far. And so beginning January 1st, 2024, companies that are of a certain size, over 250 employees, over 40 million euros in turnover, or over 20 million in total assets, and all listed companies must report on their sustainability for the 2023 financial year. And similarly, in the US, the SEC has recently changed for public companies their requirements. It's very specific on climate disclosures and climate impacts and greenhouse gas emissions, rather than more holistic, like environmental and social impact. But we see what is happening for public companies. So the main question, I think, is what on earth does this mean for startups that are smaller enterprises that don't have these mandates and regulations, but still exist in the same business context where all of this is happening, right? And so with more of this activity, with more of these conversations, there also is more politicization of ESG. I've heard former VP Pence, frame this work as a radical ESG agenda, which I don't think serves anybody. And it's worth noting, because when topics like sustainability and ESG become mainstream and politicized, there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of wasted energy, I would say, that goes into framing the best intentioned parts of these business strategies that are capable of helping us address systemic issues like our climate crisis, that just get caught up in all of that politicization. So it's worth noting, because I think it contributes a lot to the fear that many companies, startups included, have of dipping their toe in the water of sustainability and not wanting to get caught in those winds. But there is a way, I think, to strategically and wisely integrate ESG strategies into your business and into your startup. And again, not fear ramifications of it, but really embrace the business opportunities that they represent. So I wanted to make sure we noted that. Two more sort of macro trends to paint the picture of the larger business context, I would say, are more and more players are becoming involved in the ESG space. It feels like every major consulting and accounting firm is standing up or has established a climate or ESG advisory practice in the past 5 years. And it's interesting to see what each company focuses on and how they're engaging with corporates and their outputs in terms of disclosures or materiality mapping, and more of the sort of industry deliverables that help get to a place where we have a more standardized and I would say consistent vernacular around what each company is doing and what those impacts entail. We are still, I would say, a far ways away from having more consistent singular language around that, but that is a topic for another day. The point I wanted to make is that there's a lot more entities that are setting themselves up to help companies report on ESG and think about integrating ESG into their organizations. And then lastly, I would say there's more scrutiny, and I would argue welcome scrutiny, given these other factors I've talked about, because there is actually more greenwashing. And we see that, you know, ESG and sustainability and all of the words around them are buzzwords, and they're typically thought of positively, but it allows companies to provide very surface level promises and often empty commitments that are not followed through on, because it wins the company some positive recognition, positive PR in the moment. And so there is more scrutiny in this space. And I think that it is, my opinion, welcome scrutiny, because we want to ensure that the ESG work and the sustainability work that we have businesses do is truly and authentically moving forward in a way that will address climate action in a just manner. So that's sort of the big picture of evolving trends, macro factors that are creating this intense space for businesses, including startups, to take advantage of the opportunity that it all presents. And so what does this mean for startups, right? Especially if all of the regulation is targeted right now to public and larger companies. Well, venture cap and corporate investment in startups has grown at a faster rate than VC investment as a whole. It's reached 84% CAGR between 2003 and 2019, according to PwC. And we know that companies that deliver on their ESG commitments consistently outperform companies that create commitments without that structure, or again, have sort of empty promises and are greenwashing. So we know that there is that business case there. And we know now that VCs and investors are recognizing this and are incorporating it into the way that they choose companies to support and companies to invest in. So even if it's not a mandated regulation because you're not a public company, if you want to raise capital, if you want investor support, if you want the right type of attention to help grow your business and your startup, this is where you need to be thinking about your business in terms of ESG commitments that are followed through on. How do you do this, right? So there's an article I wrote that lays out 3 ways startups do ESG well, and I'm happy to circulate it. I think with the time remaining, I can go through at a high level the main 3 factors that allow startups to really address in this business context how you integrate ESG and really harness it as a business opportunity and strategy. So number 1 is mission. If your startup does not have sustainability and environmental and social considerations in its mission, everything you're doing is additive and a slapped on non-integrated after effect. What I mean by that is most startups are focused on product market fit. It's all about getting the minimal viable product out there as quickly as possible, making sure that you have speed to hit market and that you're going to get feedback, iterate, test, and improve. However, it's also important to analyze the product or service that your startup is providing and its net impact on the world. A lot of tech companies, I would say, push out their products and it comes at a great cost to workers' rights and humanitarian rights because their focus is so singular on getting that product to market without thinking about those secondary and tertiary impacts. Ulemco, for example, is a startup that was featured at COP26, and they are providing commercial vehicles with a conversion method to hydrogen fuel, which is a low emission, maybe even 0 emission type fuel for high good and low good vehicles. So the reason they're not going fully electric, my hypothesis is because hydrogen fuel cells have a far greater energy storage density than lithium ion batteries that we use in electric vehicles. And so for transportation, which is often the most, if not second most contributor to a city or a country's greenhouse gas emission footprint, we're helping convert the existing transportation fleet into a more sustainable transportation method. And so I give this example of a startup here because in their mission, they have environmental and social impact baked in addition to thinking about that product market fit, right? So they're not building the next EV, they're helping transition these large goods vehicles to a lower carbon footprint fuel. And it's not an afterthought again, it's something that they are set up to do. And it is actually allowing them to differentiate and own a piece of the market that they wouldn't otherwise be able to own. And so, it's a great example of being mission oriented and baking ESG into that mission from the get-go, which has provided them these opportunities to grow their market share and really occupy a unique space there. Number two is really extending our timescales in business and especially in startups. I think it's going through a highly pressurized environment where you want results day after day, week after week, maybe quarter after quarter, but often it feels, much faster than that. And integrating ESG into your business is a marathon. It's not a sprint. One example I love in terms of startups is this fashion company called Sojo that came out of a King's College pitch competition. And they are really trying to think about the full life cycle of clothing, especially in an industry where, fast fashion has sort of taken over and I think created unsustainable cycles of production in addition to harming and utilizing human labor in a way that is also unsustainable. And so this startup Sojo is really trying to center the people who make these clothes and value them. And at every phase of an item of clothing's life cycle, reimagining the processes that go into this for people and planet. And thinking through those longer timescales rather than thinking that it's just, a fast fix. And then lastly, ESG must be market-based. It is not a nice to have. It is not something that we just simply say we do it because it's the right thing to do. While that is true, we do live in a capitalist society, and so we must have it be market-based in our business. And the last example I'll give here is a startup called Tree Economy. Their goal is to fight climate change and biodiversity loss by valuing and enhancing natural capital. And they are connecting rural landowners to the global offset market directly. It's a segment of people that are really important in our global ecosystem for land use management to a market that is already thinking about how to monetize the preservation or at least the production of carbon credits. And so creating that channel is helping this business make ESG more market-based rather than just setting up another nonprofit or having philanthropy to support these rural landowners. So lots more to share. I hope, we'll continue a dialogue, but I wanted to give sort of that larger picture of what all these macro factors mean for the startup space. And then for startups particularly, what you can do to not just react, but be proactive in the way that you're setting up your business, really establishing a mission that's oriented around ESG, extending your timescales, and thinking about how to make ESG market-based. Thank you.
Thanks, B. I think I allow you more time because your topic is a minority, right? Because it's among the topic in sustainable ESG. Because, for example, I invite about 200 sustainable ESG professionals in this event. And then I'm looking at their profile, whether they are concerned about the ESG sustainability in startup, only few. So you are the one of a few. So I thank you for sharing your insight. And then please leave your article link to somebody ask about it. Thank you. And Keith, finally your turn. You know that the B also mentioned about the business case, right? Business case, right? Because
yes.
There are many like some non-business case, like, but they are all indirect, right? But I want to hear from you about whether you can actually have a direct business case in sustainable ESG matters.
Well, I want to thank B for a great segue into this section and introduction by Alex. Thank you. I'm going to share my presentation, and can you see it now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a review of the business case framework that we had a month ago, and you'll see that we're going to look a little bit at sustainability strategies, conceptualized framework, and incorporating sustainability into existing processes. My position is that people do what they're motivated to do, from the individual, corporate, all the way up to the governance side. We have this, who am I? I am the business unit lead for Southeast Associated Services. I am one of 12 companies within a Montague Association, which is about 120 years old. So I'm a project management professional, been around the world several times, and I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the state of South Carolina. As it shows here, my passions include digital transformation, building people, and a sustainable future. So sustainability, this thing about that we've talked so far is that the context, people have set the context for this presentation. Some people think of it as environmentally friendly. Some people think of it as robust business strategy that allows us to be successful and competitive. Some people also see it as a set of values that address the long-term needs of society. And we've talked about how that this is on a timeline that goes from here to eternity, possibly. But my little quick synopsis is that it meets today's needs without compromising the future. Because if you're not, as a corporation or a family or an individual, if you compromise your future, then you're not sustainable. This thing about business case, it addresses, this comes from Alex in his presentation, of addressing short and long-term risks and opportunities in ways to minimize harm and maximize social, environmental, and economic value. This may look familiar to some of you. It is integral to every company since its inception. We have companies that are sustainable because they've existed from the past into the current day. If they want to be sustainable into the future, then it looks at that long-term health of a company and it impacts the environment. There are social requirements that prioritize people and community, and there are the need to have technologies that customers of the future will demand. This thing about the risks, this thing about sustainability review is part of that assessment. That current, the assessment of future trends may not be correct. We think it's going to go one direction, but guess what? The future has other intentions. The evolving nature of stakeholders. We can look around and see how people are investing, product differentiation, and regulation. We also have that lack of imagination. The greatest risk of in risk is the lack of imagination of how bad things could go wrong or how good things could be. And so we have this long-term thinking of 6 to 24 months into the future is essential in making decisions. I'm going to add this point and emphasize in summary that we should see sustainability as a positive sum growth factor. Because you think of it, if sustainability was a negative sum lack of growth factor, then the companies would not exist very long. So we have to think of it as a positive sum. All the combinations of all the factors should add up, contribute to a positive sum. So this thing that we have to have is, I believe, a capable digital platform, and to understand how data flows within an organization. Because my position is that sustainable companies of the future will be able to manage and monetize their data information. And I put this together as a piece and a part to explain it. There is and I lay it out from a 50,000, maybe even way up in space, look at something. But it goes from ideas and concepts down in the bottom left-hand corner, which is some people look at as intellectual property, research, bench work, so on. And then that product is developed, but it gets within that. There's a loop here that shows about semantic ontology, about how people collect their data. And so how that data is collected, even at the pilot stage of development, is that as they work its way through to the commercial market, then you have a technology stack, either internal or external to your company, and it enables a digital transformation at different levels of people, process, and technology. And so we have this transformation going on in our society today, not only from the perspective of sustainability and ESG, but also from the digital side. And if a company is not managing their data and providing sustainable products and services, then out of that product and services, there is collecting of data to see what is that next generation of products and services that actually is a better sustainable product. And so the idea is, my position is that data, big data, is going away, because once you implement an ontology of how you generate and collect data, guess what? You don't have the big data lakes. Everything comes in as fixed, structured data sets. And then you can apply analytics, and you can also monetize the data in ways that you have not been able to do in the past. So this is a conceptualized data platform just that I like to use when I look at a company, is that I come in and I look at it from a very, very high view of how this process works. And there's some other ways that I use, but this just happens to be one I can talk about. And so people also try to say, well, let's jump into artificial intelligence. Well, artificial intelligence is driven by data sets. And so if your data is not usable, clean, quality, whatever word you want to apply, then you have difficulty applying artificial intelligence. And even then, the enterprise intelligence that comes out of it is questionable. So this is part of that look at sustainability from a product view and a data view. So with that, I believe that the corporate objectives link to the vision, mission, and values. The planning processes reflect the goals that are trying to be achieved. Operational practices are very proactive systems, hopefully, to material sourcing, supply networks, and daily operations. And of course, you also have the financial side that's going to help drive the decision makers to look at the monetary value of sustainability initiatives. So this thing about the business case, this thing about finding opportunity and value by incorporating social, environmental, and economic issues into the decision-making process is part of the business case. And so the decision-making is what I would hope people to think about, because if there's a sustainability perspective, they'll look at some of these questions, and I'm not going to go into all four of them. But the thing is that how does it impact us? How does it impact the company? Decisions will be made based on a positive or negative impact. You sum all those up, and hopefully it would be a positive, because that allows them to go off into the future. Now then, as a little bit of humor, I like to summarize and close with a little bit of humor. A mother mouse and a baby mouse were walking along when all of a sudden a cat attacked them, and the mother mouse goes, "Wolf, wolf," and the cat runs away, and she turns to the mother, her little baby, and says, "See, now you see why it's important to learn a foreign language." And the moral of the story that I draw here is that sustainability can be a foreign language to some people, not necessarily in the room where we are today. So, but it's important for us to speak several languages, not only from the business side, the social side, the environmental side. And so we speak that language, and hopefully we can pull something together that allows our children and our future generations to do well. So in closing, hopefully I've taken 8 minutes of your time. Hopefully we've looked a little quickly at adopting sustainability strategy. I presented a conceptualized framework that looks at data and product development. And of course, hopefully emphasize how we can bring sustainability into existing processes, because that's where decisions are being made. And then you can always use that little joke in public. Any questions? Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, that's a
Well, I
great,
stayed 9 minutes, man.
yeah, that's a great insight. Yeah, I
Do I
think
stop sharing?
that's very important as analogy to the language, because still out there, a lot of the company actually they don't know about the ESG sustainability at all, right? Because and then also like I think of it as not of my business, but the Marcus mentioned is climate change. Risk management is not just for the one company, is systematically we need to resolve it, and the global level and individual level, and then also we think about how we deal with it. But actually, unfortunately, there is, you know, that there is something also in the YouTube. There are a lot of the have like it's a climate change is kind of like it's a fake, or some companies are doubt about whether we really have a risk in the climate change, or whether we really care about sustainability ESG or something like this. So I think that's a very great point.
Look, I'd like to add a little bit that my interest in sustainability came in with an automotive executive friend of mine. Came into my office one time, closed the door, and we sat for hours talking about his company and how it was ranked in the sustainability index and the Dow Jones sustainability index, and how the things that they do, and also that how the sum of all the things add up to their index, and that how that they take a part of their vehicle, their car, and engineer it from the beginning, from concept all the way through, so that it can be part of that circular economy. And that it was mind-boggling conversation, and it changed my whole view of sustainability and how that the role that engineers play. So I'll stop.
Thank you. Yeah, Belly. Yeah, you
Yes.
you waited for a long time. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's
No.
your turn.
No big issue on that side. So there is still Peter and the Paul coming. So I will only very quickly take half an hour for my presentation, and then Peter and the Paul can go. So joke on the side. You see my screen, right?
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah, the last time when I was a speaker, I was talking about the circular economy and how our company Fair On is actually enabling the circular economy. And just to recap a little bit for the people who are listening here, that last time I was talking about how the consumers are actually buying a product today, whatever it is, a consumer electronics or gardening products or baby products or bikes or whatsoever. And today I'm going to go a little bit deeper on that, and I will share with you a customer survey. It's 6 slides, I will say already front off, so you probably with the 6 minutes we are more or less done with that. But I was very happy to hear actually this evening about the word startup, so and specifically what he was referring to, the product market fit and the mission, etc. So Fair On as a company, we indeed have a very clear mission, and that is actually based on the SDG 9 and the SDG 12. SDG 9 is the building the resilient infrastructure, and the SDG 12 to ensure a sustainable consumption. And today this slide is all about that. So let's get into it. So subscription benefit. So those ones who were not in the last time, so people when they are buying the products, I mean they buy with the cash, or they buy the products with the leasing or rental, or now there is this so-called subscription program available. Some people are also using this as a product as a service or hardware as a service. And this survey what we made in roughly 4,000 people, and just to give you a little bit, maybe Gabrielle, maybe you can mute or whoever is there to hasn't muted. There is a little bit of noise. So yeah, 4,000 consumers questionnaire was made, and we were actually asking them that what was the biggest advantages actually for the subscriptions. And of course, I mean the low monthly price to buy something like iPhone 13 or 14, and usually you are paying 1,000 or 1,200 euro or dollars or pounds for that, and then now you can get it as a subscription over the X period of time. But what was very surprising for us is that the consumers, and to put this a little bit in the perspective from the startup point of view, like a fair honest here, is that in the last 15 months we have went from the 0 to 75 million euro payment volumes. So and this is then distributed roughly with the 50,000 consumers in the 8 different countries, and we are adding a country after another. So what was amazing feedback was the possibility to upgrade, possibility to renew actually those products, while ensuring that those products, what the people are upgrading, again, whatever they are, consumer electronics, whatever their gardenings or bike, etc., that we are ensuring that there is a second life for those products. I'm very often giving one example about the smartphones, and I'm asking people that, hey guys, do you actually know how much water is used to build a one smartphone which has the 200 gram of weight? And the people are saying that they actually absolutely no water, there is no water needed. But when I'm saying that it's actually 80,000 liters of water used to build a smartphone, then the people are starting to think that where the hell is this 80,000 liter used, or where the hell is this 280 kilogram of raw materials which are mined for that in order to get the 200 gram phone. Or talking about the CO2, like this evening we have been discussing it several times. So it's a close to 100 kilogram of CO2, what is the consumed for that? For many people, the CO2 as such, whatever we are talking about, the grams or kilogram doesn't make a lot of sense. But if I'm saying that 100 kilogram of CO2 is equivalent to drive a car for 1,000 kilometers, then it starts to make sense, and that people are starting to think, okay, what it actually means. So long story short, so low monthly price, possibility to upgrade, and the recycling of the supplement products was very important. However, I have to say that we are in the very early stage when we are talking about the recycling products. And we are seeing these two shifts happening. The one shift happening when we are specifically talking about the generation 4 and the X, where they are buying the products and using them rather than buying and owning the product. The percentage of the recycling of the supplement process is increasing pretty much week by week, because we are constantly updating the figures what we are getting. So we also asked them that would they have been buying the product without any subscription or any kind of sustainable or responsible buying experience, like I'm putting it. And the close to 70% were saying that no, they wouldn't been buying in the first place in the process. They were saying, hey, we'll just go with an old one and we'll do how we goes, and then maybe one day there will be a company who will actually propose such a kind of responsible buying experience for the people. So that was also quite a quite a important point what we were getting out on that. 3 Ps, we were talking about the 3 Ps today, so that people, profit, and the planet. And of course the profit is important when we are talking about the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, or when we are talking about the retailers. And those retailers, brands who are working already with them, they are saying that roughly 40% of their customers are completely new customers, which are actually coming because they heard it somewhere in the web page or some advertisement or friends, etc. And now because they know about such a kind of opportunity to buy it responsible, they are coming and getting that. And of course, the retailers and the brands who are proposing such a kind of program are the big winners, because I mean, 40% is quite a massive increase if you are looking back. So bring the customer loyalty. So yes, there was a question, and we were asking, okay, hey guys, would you be interested in to upgrade actually in the 2 years or 3 years, whatever the product life cycle is, usually when the product has to be updated, already from the technical reasons, like you have a laptop and you have to change the battery, or or just there are new phones coming, or there are some the bikes which has to be just changed because now my child was 4 years old and 2 years after was 6 years old, so there's no way that 6 years old can anymore drive the bike of the 4 years old. So, and again, I mean, the 60% were saying yes, they will certainly renew the products in the 2 years time. 15% was saying that don't know yet, and that's actually the fact where we are adding the 60% and the 15% and saying that, hey, the retailers, the brand can actually bring the customer loyalty up to 75%. So maybe not surprised for any of us, but we were still asking how did they come across about the subscription or the product as a service or hardware as a service, like Apple just launched from the US that at the end of the year they will bring such a kind of model into place for their own subscribers. Yes, it's coming from the web page, but for me, I like actually mostly that yes, there are still this social media impact, and there are friends who are actually telling for another one that, hey, if you want to buy responsibly, then use this retailer or use this brand. They are recycling their own products and giving a second life. Because remember, when I talked about 8,000 liters of water is used to make a smartphone, which basically means, in other words as well, that when we are building any kind of product, 95% of the CO2 emissions are actually coming from the very early stage when the products are going to be manufactured. And the last but not least, we also then, of course, ask about the age of the people. And in my last presentation, we were talking about Generation Z. So we are here seeing that the Generation Z and the Generation Y are the big players there. Whereas then the Generation X and baby boomers a little bit less. So, but the shift is very clearly saying that, hey, we are actually going not only buying a product, but using a product. So that in sort on my side. So if you want to get the discussion with me, here are my contact details. You can reach out to my telephone number. That's based in France, where I'm making currently the call, or you can send me just an email, or you can just visit our webpage, fairown.com, to learn more about how we are actually enabling the circular economy and making the world a better place to live. So thank you very much. Back to studio and Alex.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah, circular economy is also a big topic. So yeah, we cannot cover in a short time, but unfortunately, we run short of time. So maybe we can back if you're available in later of the today. Okay, so Peter, finally you. Yeah, he's another big guy in sustainable ESG. So yeah, I hear from you because you teach me about you should be like a differentiator between the ESG and sustainability, and so because I think that Joe might be join, because I contacted him through the whole my method, and then probably I could not find his name in here. So maybe the one topic actually that we discussed about in the first like of the measurement in ESG and the SDG was that the like definition, right? Because what exactly ESG, what is SDG, and what is like sustainability? So I think the good time to hear from you about it, and other like some fundamental issues or something like that in ESG and sustainability. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you, Alex, and hello everybody. Thank you to everyone for the super talks. Actually, I heard some of them before, but I've learned more this time around than the first time, which either means I wasn't concentrating or I'm beginning to understand a bit better. So just to remind everybody, because I'm meant to be recapping the talk we did before, and my slot was actually around sustainable products. And I'll come off camera in a minute, just to introduce myself a bit more so you understand. So I've been working in industry now for 38 years or so. I'm a qualified food technologist, and I worked in government and decided after about 8 years that government was really boring and they really didn't get much done, which is a problem we now have if you listen to Mark, and I agree with him. I went into the private sector, and many people really don't understand how businesses create impacts on the planet, the environment, climate, social impacts, etc., because of the growth models that actually started around 1998. And I don't have time to talk about all of that kind of stuff now. And as I think Alex knows and a couple of others, I'm working on sort of putting something together to help people on LinkedIn, etc., to explain a bit more around how companies really, really work. Because actually ESG is a more recent sort of investors sort of space, and it's been hijacked a bit and taken into the sustainability space. And the reason I mention it is because if you live in a capitalist economy, there is a growth mindset that supersedes everything else. And it's only in the last few years that it really has sort of taken a different kind of a slant, and you've seen all these different kind of initiatives, and I'm not going to go into all of that. Now, the reason I'm covering a sustainable product is I wanted to explain a bit more about the origins of it. And I'm exceptionally proud in my case. I've been very fortunate to be in really senior positions on executives, and I've been able to do some of the stuff that I've wanted to do. So let me give you an example about what I mean. When I was headhunted, and I won't name the company, but you can guess it if you go on LinkedIn, I was headhunted by a really major international food company to go in and lead the technical function, to be technical director and external affairs director, following the acquisition of a really major business from a conglomerate in the private equity sector. Private equity in those days did not engage in sustainability. That was a fact. And in fact, when I took over the European operations, I had German and Austrian and Dutch unions calling me saying, we don't want to be owned by this private equity company. And I promised them that it wouldn't be the way they thought. And my first task, so you can try and understand how really what goes on inside companies with products, was to negotiate a contract, my employment contract, that required the owner, the private equity owner, to honor two things, not my salary, not my working conditions, just two things: to keep the agriculture program that the previous company put together, and to allow me to be in charge of all sourcing policy, not procurement. Procurement, just buy. They are service providers. I was in charge of all sourcing policy. And it took me the best part of probably 18 months to do all the materiality risk assessment to understand that it was a business that actually was illegally trading in a number of products and it didn't even know it. And the first priority I did is present all of those risks to the exec and the board. And that was signed off, a world sector first in that space, a 5-year sustainability program where I committed a number of targets and we delivered all of those targets on time. But in those days, we weren't worried about climate change. I was more worried about supply chain resilience, natural capital, biodiversity, ensuring that there was no modern slavery, things like that. And they still are relevant issues today. So when you hear about greenwashing, actually there's more important things going on today with the move from meat proteins to plant, because we've also got health washing going on. But that's another maybe topic we can talk about another time. So the intent of my very small, presentation, and it is a micro dot on the whole, scope of all of this kind of discussion, is to help understand why is it that I have been successful in ensuring I've never been accused of greenwashing, never been, I think I've launched 3,500 new certified more sustainable products, note the more sustainable products, and I've never had one regulatory or ENGO challenge. And the reason for that is because inside the businesses that I've managed, I've designed what is called a claims authentication tool. It's a very strict process that goes through the innovation stages and does not allow marketeers to bullshit consumers, put anything they want in marketing content, etc. And it's been very strictly adhered to, and therefore you've had great success with products. We've never had challenges. So I'll switch off my sort of webcam because it might help a bit more with signal from my side because I'm everyone here with all the strikes in the UK is working from home, so we're all struggling with Wi-Fi. And I've just covered a little bit about giving you an insight into really what is a sustainable product. And honestly, it really is a very small dot on the whole thing around how this works. And just for you to know, I was a chief sustainability officer after 2 years when I joined the company. And there's a long story around the company I joined before when I got into sustainability, from quality assurance, etc. I was a chief sustainability officer in 2010. And the role has dramatically changed, but I've been privileged to have a lot of influence by being on executives and boards. Because if you don't have seniority, you can't get some of these things done. It really is my learning, because I go into other colleague companies where they're mid-range, they're a side sort of function, and they're trying to make an impact. And obviously there's a great deal more sort of understood, and there's a lot more integration around sustainability nowadays, and so there should be. But I've just been very fortunate to be also have some fantastic CEOs and chairmen who really understood the vision, and I did show the financial benefits. There's no question triple bottom line worked for me, it worked for the companies, they've exited, they made $3 billion, and the company is even more sustainable now than it was before, and so forth. So don't believe it can't be done. It's all about attitude and being prepared to just engage everybody to drive. And when I say engage everybody, I'm talking suppliers, communities, and employees. So very quickly, I'll share a bit of this. If I just switch all this off, so it just helps a little bit. And I'll share, if I can get this to share a bit. I'll just, where's my, share the screen. I'll bring this up. Hopefully you can see this. Yes, you can. Can you see this, everybody?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. So please allow me to give a little friendly warning. Expectation management, we don't mislead or greenwash. I'm really passionate about this. And what I will say is that in 10 minutes or so, we're not going to cover the world, but I can always do another, more detailed sort of workshop or something for those that are interested. Obviously, I do this with private companies where they don't want to reveal sometimes, that they've got challenges. How do we go through this, Pete, etc. And I do that on the in the consulting space. So look, I think this was mentioned, and it really is important to understand how this whole movement in sustainability has actually changed dramatically because of climate change. But the original sustainability pillars of environment, social and economic, they came out of the Brundtland Commission. They synthesized years and years of work. And I know people like Mark have been working in climate change, but actually people like myself who came into this space relatively more recently, sort of 15 years ago, we use sustainability as our primary sort of compass on so what do we do? And we partnered with many NGOs who had their own views about doing things. And I remember very early on when I was Chief Sustainability Officer in 2010, to verify things, because I insist on verification. I don't verify my own progress or work. It has to be done independently. I had around a choice of around 144 standards in the food business I was in. We're now at the point where we have 450 standards. So you can imagine how difficult it is for a company that wants to remain credible and try and find a way of choosing what is it that I do. And these things are quite important because when the Brundtland Commission sort of synthesized all of this and we come up with this great sort of developing the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, it really is very plausible, and it sounds like it is, but how do you metricate that? And that's where our challenges started ever since, because it's a really great statement. It's very noble, but the reality is, how the hell do we measure that? It really is almost impossible. And I challenge anyone to show me how to do that, even with all the kind of tools that we have nowadays. So, and the idea was that you try and find some kind of balance, and clearly, the sweet spot is in the middle, as Kit earlier explained, between the three pillars. And then you've got different approaches where some companies and sort of organizations, instead of using the environmental social, they've sort of tried to make it a bit easier with, people, planet, and profit. And the problem with this space is that you have a number of competing forces. You've got the commercial responsibility of delivering a profit, and it isn't a profit for shareholders. It's a profit for the business to survive, to pay its workers, to pay its suppliers, to carry on, producing a product. Clearly, if you're doing a service. And then you've got another sort of competing ideology, and politics gets into it. And that's where sometimes it all gets a bit messy, and I try and sort of, navigate that very carefully. And the basis upon which I have managed most of the sustainability programs, and I've run 4 separate corporate first integrated sustainability programs, all based on total quality management principles. Everyone's owned a scorecard of their function with an integrated sustainability element in it. It could be environment, it could be social, it could even be clearly economic. And we've reported the social performance, the environmental performance, and the financial performance. And we've obviously got the ESG kind of platforms and frameworks that exist today. But that, especially in the financial and investment world. But the reality is you can make these things a lot more simpler if you really do understand your materiality risks, and you are confident and have the systems, the leadership systems, and the processes to be able to have proper, transparent disclosure, because that is really where you start to change attitudes inside the business, let alone outside when you're making claims. So is there such a thing as sustainable product? Well, I can talk about this all day for different products, not just food products. And what I tried to do is just depict a very, very simple diagram, almost for somebody who's almost, in high school, to try and understand a little bit about how, we've sort of tried to, approach this. And true sustainable development, and I don't mean environmental management, I'm talking about the 3 pillars, right, have distinct stages of risk understanding. Companies that are new, staff may not even have the skills. In the early days, we did not have some of the skills to understand risk. And we didn't understand supply chains, especially as a result of globalization. It's why things like blockchain are very attractive. But I have launched the world's first blockchain seafood product in the Netherlands. And I can promise you what you put in is what you lock in. And if you're inspecting a supply chain and you are really, really serious about inspecting the integrity, the veracity of your supply chain that meets your standards and specifications, there is no substitute for an on-the-ground inspector, auditor. This is really important, and I'm very passionate about that. Even though I've done blockchain, I'm very happy, that digitization exists, but there's no substitute for on-the-ground inspection. Now, what happens is you do have a sort of a really, and I've really simplified this, because inside the businesses I run, I've got decision trees and all manner of things going on. But basically, you have a product that's not sustainable, and what that really means is it's damaging the environment. There's no respect for all the different parameters that go into responsible sourcing or stewardship of the environment, etc. And it could even be, and there are some norms and codes of conduct that exist. There's a couple that exist inside the United Nations. There's other global sort of conventions, etc., where you can actually say, actually, this is illegal. And then you start to become more responsible as you become more risk aware. You start to do the materiality risk assessment, etc. And a company starts with the product, and it can be anything we choose. Let's just say it's a vegetable product, it could be a fish or a meat product. They've all got different origins. But in the globalized supply chain, we may have a chicken product whose sourcing comes from Brazil, it could come from Thailand, it could come locally if you're in the US, UK, Europe, wherever. But in global supply chains, that actually isn't the case. You'll be really surprised at the amount of globalized movement of food and the origin of food. And to demonstrate responsibility in the way I set defining it, and there are conventions that I agreed inside, especially the UK industry, where we made a sort of an agreement not to make a sustainable claim, but to say responsibly produced or sourced or manufactured, especially in the days where we didn't have a clue about the carbon impact. And if you are legally compliant, you can honestly say that you're at least making progress on having a responsible position. You then start the journey on improving aspects of the production of that food products. If you're still in the area of responsible sourcing, and it's a multi-ingredient product, you may find there's palm oil in there, all manner of different things. And these have all got different levels of requirement. And you are going on a journey with that product to become more sustainable. And what I call that is dimensional claims. You can make some dimensional claims. Marketeers, though, they want to sell a product and differentiate in the marketplace. They put pretty adverts together. They do really pretty branding, etc. They convince the supermarkets to list the product. And guess what? It performs in this way and that way. And some of the things that people underestimate around claims and sustainability are things like taste. I've got research to show that the tastier a product is, the less wastage there is. That is more sustainable, but consumers don't understand that. So you can talk about taste, but I've never let anyone make that claim, even though we know the research exists. But you can make a claim around, for instance, it's responsibly sourced, it's responsibly farmed, etc., if you can show those kind of processes, etc. So you end up with a product sustainable keeping unit, which is just one simple product, and it might be currently the most sustainable product. And there are many products in the marketplace, for those of us that really police these things and look at them, and markets are different. Europe is exceptionally more strict on these things, and it's getting stricter than, for instance, the US markets and so forth. And there's a lot of greenwashing still going on, nevertheless, all over the world. But you can have a SKU, a product that is more sustainable. And you'll carry on progressing that. Let's just say, for instance, you have a life cycle analysis of a product. You've ticked the box on all the ethical, trading and social compliance aspects of the social element of that product. And you'll feel that you actually have got quite a sustainable product. And then comes along someone else's equivalent product, and guess what? They have a carbon intensity that's lower than yours. So which is more sustainable? These are the kind of things that really exist with products. And that's why I laugh when, Tesla, for instance, makes these claims about, the product, when I know that the standards on social don't even meet my programs, let alone the kind of claims that have been made around, that particular product. And as far as my experience has shown so far, there is no such thing as a sustainable product. There always will be more progress, continuous improvement, learning more, understanding more. And that's a journey that will go on ad infinitum. It's almost the challenge that Mark was describing, and you just multiply it up by billions of times. So I just want to emphasize and help you a bit more understanding. In all the coaching sessions that I've coached thousands of colleagues and executives and senior leadership teams, to train them not to lie, not to greenwash, because the kind of brands that we've been managing, I've managed brands that are 65 years old and 150 years old. And we're custodians of brands, and we do not lie. And the position and the motivation that I sort of, especially new marketeers, try to give is leaders lead, they don't follow. I really don't care what the consumer wants. I really don't care what others are doing. We lead and provide consumers with nutritious food that is more responsible. We don't break the law. We certainly don't have modern slavery. and all the other things that go with that. And that starts with absolutely not being illegal, having legally compliant, products. Wherever the product is made and wherever it's sold, you have to be compliant to regulations. And then you start to, go on your sort of materiality risk progress or social or disclosure, you verify, and then, you become more credible. And, to just sort of help you understand, that's responsible when you go on that journey. You can responsibly make it, source, GMP, ethical trading, and then you've got some kind of a more sustainable claim. Let's just take, the great work that Veli's doing, super work. We all hold these gadgets in our hand, remote controls, mice, etc. If you took a typical product like that, you'll find that most companies actually have their case and parts responsibly sourced in some way. When you start to dig down on the materials, you start to find that there's ethical trading and social compliance issues. In fact, the device industry was one of the worst industries in terms of performance on well-being of its workers because of blue light years ago and things like that that we understand more about. They've made it correctly, GMP, a good manufacturing practice. They've got good carbon insights, but they may not have carbon mitigation plans, and they certainly don't have some independent, CO2 verified targets. So again, you can make a sustainability claim, and let's be clear, some of these products are very good, but they are not sustainable, not just yet. Okay, and the question that we had was, does the Gen Zed care? And there was, I think, a couple of other speakers that gave more detail on that. I wasn't one to do that. The research that I have seen, and I've been looking at research now in the consumer space for the best part of 25 years, is yes, they do care. They are a different generation. They've got a different moral compass. With all the digital, social digital sort of exposure that issues now have, very different to my generation when we relied on newspapers and the radio and a couple of news bulletins during the day, and they very much will have a great say in choosing more sustainable products, but they also need more help in understanding what is credible and not, which is why there is so much concern around greenwashing, and in my case more around health washing for new plant-based products. Okay, I'll stop there. I'm sorry I can talk about this kind of stuff for days on end. There's so much to cover. So any questions, I'm very happy to take them offline. Feel free to sort of send me a question. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Peter. That actually you mentioned about the ESGs for especially is adopted in the financial sectors, and the sustainability, the traditional pillar is the E and the environment and the society is the same, but in the sustainability they care about the economics, and then in the ESG is a governance. I think that just think about, because you mentioned about for example, responsibility is important, right? Because I think that why the investors put into a G instead of an E is, I think that the G is for the governance over a responsibility and governance over the accountability. So with this factor like this, looking at even you try the profit or the economic factors, actually the most important factor is to a governance of a transparent management, and then you talk about the ethical, the honest. So that's a more important, right? So I think that
it is very, very true, Alex. And everyone talks about ESG, but actually in the investment world, especially in private equity, there is the principles of responsible investment. But even before they were set up, I had a governance committee. I remember sitting the CEO down, and he said, "Pete, I haven't got no clue about all this." I goes, "You've got to chair it. Don't worry, I'll do all the secretarial work, etc." And we have to just train the businesses. Now, this was 2010. By the probably, 2-3 years down the line, they were expecting Pete to do the landscape risk analysis, tell us what's going on. You know, I set 5-year plans and roadmaps. Are they accurate still? Are they relevant? What's the investment that we need? Made big decisions, come out of some very, very high risk areas that I thought there was just too much corruption for me and the company to fix. These are the kind of real hard decisions that you make, and you do make those kind of decisions in those governance circles, because, you know, generally executives and board, they look at the commercial performance and all the other metrics. Nowadays, there's obviously much difference because we have ESG committees and so forth. But, you know, we had to set up special, you know, governance processes, and that's where we used to discuss all these kind of issues. But they were very much integrated in operations. So, and marketing, innovation, all the new products had to go through a particular sort of stage gate process. So it's hard work. And one of the things that I really want to reassure many who sort of sometimes wonder is there are a terrific number of companies that do this now, and it's business as usual. It's just they don't talk about it. And sometimes when people say there is greenwashing going on, I actually think companies sometimes greenwash and they don't realize they're greenwashing, seriously. Sometimes they know it, but often, you know, they're trying to work to peer pressure and make a commitment on 2030, 2040, and they make mistakes. And I resisted commitments when I started and peer pressure, and I was under really big pressure at Tesco. I remember Tesco wanting to really make big commitments, and I wouldn't let them because I said, I don't know what the baseline is. I don't know what your risk profile is yet, when I was headhunted there. So these are the kind of realities. Governance is absolutely key, and really it's not just it's top down, but it's bottom up. Everyone has to be engaged, and it can be done. I've worked with developing countries, and you'll be surprised how much they care, although they call it in developing countries more CSR, because it's the way they view some of the sustainability obligations of businesses is to help the communities more, which is understandable. So, yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, finally, Paul, I'm very, very sorry about this. It's already past more than 40 minutes. Paul, are you there? Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
Turn. You can go ahead as far as you can go.
Yeah. No, I'll
Sorry, Paul.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll keep it pretty short. So, thank you, Alex. So, my name is Paul Stockhall. I have a sort of background in highly regulated FMCG sector, sort of policy, public affairs, communications, and then traceability. I moved on to leading a sort of certification and traceability system in the luxury fashion sector. And more recently, I've been interested in the innovation that's taking place in fashion following what we've seen in food. I think the term now is next gen materials in fashion. And I'm now moving to a sort of full-time role for a company in that space. So I need to update my LinkedIn, but I'm just going to kind of summarize, because I don't know if anyone on the call has much understanding, knowledge of the fashion sector. So I thought I'd just give an overview of what's happened and what's going to happen next. So clearly there are challenges and there are opportunities. So global, fashion is a global polluter. It's well documented. And the challenge is that the market is going to rise significantly over the next sort of 8 years to around $3.3 trillion by 2030. And put it in context, the global fashion kind of greenhouse gas emissions are the equivalent to the UK, Germany, and France's total output. So it's a significant polluter. The fast fashion kind of linear models that exist already, the wear and discard, are totally unsustainable. And there's an urgent need to address the kind of ethical, environmental, and social challenges. So how does the consumer respond to this? Well, interestingly, the consumer has been very active. I think, and this came back to our previous talk, Generation Z are more informed. They're asking more questions about the products they purchase, particularly like animal-based or just everything down to recyclability or the other ingredients in the product. Interestingly, looking at the McKinsey report, around 43% of Gen Z say they intentionally buy from companies that have a robust sustainability reputation. So they are looking at it, which is good. There is an increasing demand for recycled and reused. ready to hire models and other forms of more sustainable delivery. And this again is all positive. But generally, consumers want good quality products at the right price that is also fashionable. And that comes through to some of the points I'll touch on in a minute. So what is the fashion sector doing? So there's a global drive to embed sustainability principles within major brands and suppliers. There's implementation of internal targets, and they're linked to sort of UN SDGs, which we touched on earlier. There is cross-sector collaboration to focus on reducing impact. And we've seen this through the Fashion Pact, which is a sort of coalition of 60, 70 global CEOs of major fashion brands. And there's organizations such as Textile Exchange, which is a huge membership organization operating out of the US, which is delivering a lot on requirements on reduction. And that's about bringing sort of coalitions together. We're seeing already in terms of how brands are responding through changing sourcing. So looking at what has a less impact to increasing focus on recycled materials and new innovation, looking at this sort of closed loop approach. They're also driving implementation of standards and traceability, so blockchain or similar, to provide greater transparency and assurance to consumer. And that's definitely the case in the animal fibers sector, where there needs to be kind of more transparency in terms of where they're sourcing from, and ultimately then giving that information to the consumer. And we know from disclosing supply chain data that it builds trust of employees, labour, and environmental advocates and investors, increasingly investors. So, and also, actually, I should add, it's an important tool in tackling the illegal market. But a problem is with fashion, as more brands and suppliers adopt sustainability targets and language, there is this need for regulatory intervention to move against greenwashing claims. And we're seeing this in the European Union at the moment, where there's various pieces moving through which will target this reported claims that are made in relation to sustainability. We are seeing more standards coming forward, and that's positive. Certainly the sort of life cycle analysis example, which is the product environmental footprint at EU level, is one such model. And that looks to effectively put a carbon footprint impact on a label, on a garment or a product that you would buy in, say, 2-3 years from now. But this is not without criticism, because the model maybe doesn't factor in certain types of products and how they're used and worn over their full life cycle. So there are still challenges even here, even when there's a sort of coalescing around recognized models. The role of government and standards bodies, organizations is critical in creating and delivering the valid recognized approach, and that's really important. But government also know at the moment they need to act, and the economic climate is also presenting some real-time challenges. And I saw this last week when I was in Brussels, where there's a slight softening of the language because obviously they're concerned about impacts on local producers if they put targets or requirements in place that would challenge the current model, unless they have something that can easily replace it. What's interesting, and from my perspective as I'm moving into now, is the sort of role of next gen materials. So next gen or bio-based or laboratory grown have seen a significant increase in demand and interest. They tend to sort of be perceived as addressing the ethical problem of animal use in fashion and the plastic-based synthetic alternatives. And they're around now, I think 100 companies already in this space producing new materials from fur to leather. And you'll see this through the likes of mushroom leather, which is now appearing in high-end retail. I think Stella McCartney, the designer, is launching or has launched a new mushroom leather handbag this summer. We've seen more than $5 billion invested in the sector since 2015, but investment has actually doubled over the last year. So between 21 and 2020, investment doubled. So there's a lot of interest in this whole space. There are many, let's say, new innovations coming forward that have support from government, and we've seen this at the EU level, where investment is being put into these specific companies, partly obviously because they're looking at the challenge of net zero as well, and what these companies can potentially do there. But there are challenges. So bio offers great opportunities, but it's also important to address these challenges. So delivering products that are ultimately price competitive, they're durable, high quality, and meet the customer needs. There is a challenge as well that you've got existing structures that are mature, they've been in place a long time, and how do you compete with those? So in the synthetic and animal fiber space. I think there's also really a need, and this comes back to what was talked about earlier, actually understanding what the environmental social impacts are of bio, because it is arguably too early to run full LCAs because you don't have any historical data to work from. When we're talking about very fledgling companies that aren't yet operating at scale, how do you measure their impact? There are options here, such as material flow analysis, to look at how you can address certain known impacts. But it's really an interesting area. What is the actual impact of these new lab-grown solutions? There is a clear need, particularly for expertise, for investment, because they are in many cases startups, as well as sort of developing common standards and looking at potential regulatory requirements which will come down the line. And I think it's fair to say that even though it's a very interesting and exciting area of fashion, to be fully disruptive, I think the consensus is it's going to be 10, maybe 15 years plus before it's really embedded. There's also a real risk here that you repeat the mistakes of the past. You make a claim about something that is supposedly better and ultimately just repeat those same mistakes. And achieving scale, profitability, is that going to be at the expense of the planet? So it's interesting following some of these new companies' sort of values, principles, ethos, whether they can stand by those as they move forward, because ultimately, they have to seek investment and they have to be seen to be delivering a product that's viable. So it's balancing that challenge. So there's a long road ahead for fashion, absolutely. It is delivering change, but more is needed. Absolutely. I think collaboration is key to deliver on those standards and targets. Absolutely, you need regulatory intervention here as well to really push harder, I think, on what companies should be doing. I think the next generation market is really interesting and can deliver in a certain number of areas, but it's going to take time. But what's interesting is that consumer is already driving change. And we've seen that already. So there are some positives here, I think, but it's a very kind of interesting time, and I think in the world of fashion and textiles and fibers. So that's it for me.
Oh, thank you, Paul. I think that's a very important topic. For example, fashion industry, fashion and clothes is very related to our everyday life. And then, that recently there was a cover story in New Scientist magazine. And they talk about how can the fashion industry can be sustainable. And then the reason is that the fashion industry actually one among the top GHG emission generator in even more than transportation. So I always surprised that because everyday life we need like clothes, and then with food and agriculture, food and then clothes is one of the top GHG emissions. So I think very important to relate to like climate change. So thank you for your focus on that area, and especially the sustainable product.
Sure.
Okay. So we've passed more than like 1 hour. So thank you for everyone. It's a fascinating audience today because we started from about the 50 joined today because of the initial some problem with the joining in the Zoom meeting. But contrary to that, unfortunately, we missed one speaker, Joe, but a lot of people actually join and then stay up to now. So I will give you 100 points for you all speakers and like a participant today. The thing that actually that you should be, this is my apologize, but I'm not a professional event organizer. I'm also like you, I'm a professional and I'm a subject matter expert. And I really want to hear from all of the global experts to their insight and view, because for example, Peter mentioned 35 years experience, right? Nobody can match, right? Because I also have a 30 years experience high industry, all members of this this community is a lot of the experience. So it's rare case actually to share this kind of knowledge, because the reason is because I'm not an event like organizer for profit or whatever. I want to really want to share this one. So that's why I organize this one. But somebody asked me that why don't we keep going on this kind of like a community? So he asked me to make some community to join people, that all the participant and speaker gather together and then keep going on to share their inside idea and experience. So I'm going to make a LinkedIn group under this name, and then I will invite you all to this LinkedIn group, and then we can keep going on, because we cannot like talk about a lot of topic and insight to share everything today. So I promise it. And then if you want to share your presentation, just send me, then I will share when I share the like a link for the recording. And otherwise, actually, if you have anything to talk, finally, just do that. Otherwise, you can leave freely, or if you want to say something, and then you can share your comment or whatever you want.
Well, Alex, I'm not sure you're looking at the chat. You know, we just want to thank you for organizing this, because I seem to get messages from you all hours of the day, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, he's in America. This must be 1 or 2 in the morning. So I do worry. Make sure that you stay sustainable for yourself, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there anyone to share?
Yeah, good morning to all. I am Mubarak Ali from India. Here the time is 12 AM. Respected all, thanks for your invaluable insight. Extending my sincere thanks to organizer for this opportunity and lighting the lamp on my continuous learning, sir. Day to day new learnings. The learnings helped me a lot. And kudos to Alex sir for your great show and the great initiative, sir. Thanks a lot and thanks for the opportunity.
Very good. Very good. Mubarak. Okay.
Please go ahead. Anyone? Okay. Okay, Joan. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Alex, thanks for the coordination of this magnificent event. And I am agree with you. It's gonna be an excellent way to keep in contact, keep in touch, that we can share best practices among the world related to ESG. We have a great opportunity to act and to share practices together that we in our specific countries can impose all these efforts of these very, very, very important initiatives. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, we will keep going on as promised, right? So yeah, it will be a good community, right? Because we can change the world, right? So all
we are going to change the world.
Yes.
We are expected to do that.
Yes. Okay. Mubarak, you can go ahead.
Thanks a lot and thanks for the opportunity, sir. Very insightful and inspiring session. And kudos for you, sir.
Thank you. Is
and
there anyone?
I recuse all the panelists. If it is possible, kindly share your presentation, sir, because knowledge is sharing. I will share it to my network of people. They will gain the insight from the presentation, sir, please.
Okay. Yeah, is there anyone? You can share finally. You know that because out there, our landscaping guy actually make a noise, start a noise. It's pushing me to like a stop. So is there anyone to talk? Okay, so if you don't have it, and then I will share this recording, and then you can like maybe I will share the like link to the like LinkedIn group under this name. And then you can participate and then you can freely talk each other, you can share. And then as Juan said, we can change the world in a small part, even if it's a small part. Okay, thank you for attending for today's webinar and like staying for a long time. And then thank you for speakers and participants. And then it's time to say goodbye. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night, Alex. All the best, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you and bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.